we see artists' lives playing out right in front of us, via social media, whether it is someone like a Kanye West who has talked about, he's been open about his bipolar diagnosis and what that's been like. And we've heard Kid Cudi talking about it, even the mighty Kendrick Lamar. I think his last album was like an ode to mental health, generational trauma and that sort of thing, and how it affects the family and visually.
Welcome to Shaping Freedom with Lisane Basquiat, the podcast where we help you unlock your potential and redefine what it means to be free. I'm your host, Lisane Basquiat. I'm a former corporate executive, a life strategist, and the founder of Shaping Freedom. With a background spanning corporate, artistic, and personal development, I bring a unique perspective to empowering others. Listen in to discover inspiring stories and practical insights that will help you reclaim your life and rewrite your narrative. My intention is for you to gain the tools and motivation to be free in your relationships, your communities, and within yourself. This, my friends, is Shaping Freedom.
Hi, friends. Today I'm speaking with Shanti Das, a former music executive who helped to launch the careers of music icons like TLC, Toni Braxton, Usher, Outkast. She's worked with legends like Prince and other people in the music industry that we're all very familiar with. What's so interesting about this part of her journey is that she's taken the base of music and has connected it to mental health. And today we're going to have a conversation talking about the importance of speaking openly about our mental health and doing so without shame, but with the idea that we really can talk it through, work it through, and do something about it. She's created a nonprofit called Silence the Shame, which is born out of her own personal experience and struggle with shame around mental health and asking for help. We also talked about training parents to talk with their children about what it looks like to manage your own mental health and what it looks like as a parent to create an environment where children feel safe and able to communicate openly about the things that they're struggling with. This is an incredible conversation. I'm really looking forward to you hearing it. And this is my conversation with Shanti Das. All right. So I am really excited about this, my next guest on the Shaping Freedom with Lisane Basquiat podcast. I am Lisane Basquiat, your host. And I have with me today a woman who really, this is the first time we're meeting, and was really excited to hear about the work that you're doing around two things that are so important to me and really near and dear to my heart. One is the work that this woman is doing around mental health and mental illness and bringing awareness to mental illness through her nonprofit, Silence the Shame. And then the work that she's also doing around bringing an awareness to issues of mental health within the hip hop community. And the person that I am speaking about is Shanti Das, who is joining me virtually from Atlanta. And I just want to say that I'm so excited that you're here, and thank you so much for agreeing to have a chat with me, Shanti. I'm very excited about this conversation.
Thank you. And it's truly an honor to be on your show, and just obviously an honor to be in conversation with you and all that your family means to our culture. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So what I'd love to do is, why don't we just get started with, let's talk about Silence the Shame and how this idea came to pass, just to kind of bring the audience up to kind of what you're working on today. And then we'll get into some juicy things about, mental health and all of that.
Absolutely. So I am originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I think it's important to note that my father died by suicide when I was 7 months old. And it was tough for my family. My mom, having to raise three young children, she never really properly dealt with my father's suicide. And we're talking the early 70s. So although my dad was of Indian descent, my mom was African American. And so people in Black culture just didn't really talk a lot about mental health and much less suicide back then. And so I saw her struggle for years, and she leaned heavily on her faith, but never went to counseling or dealt with the trauma of that. And so fast forward, once I got older, my siblings and I never really talked about it a lot. And we even kind of told people that dad died by something else because we were embarrassed about it, when we were growing up. And so once I established my career in the entertainment industry, because I worked for a lot of high profile record companies from LaFace Records to Arista on down, I started dealing with my own level of stress and anxiety. And I think because I had a lot of unresolved trauma with my father, I just didn't know how to process stress well. And I developed, I started becoming, I think, anxious and depressed. And the first time I ever went to therapy was around 2003 or 2002, 2003. And I kind of had a meltdown at the airport. And I remember later that night when I was living in New York saying, maybe I should just kill myself. And that was the first time I had ever uttered those words, right? So it scared me.
Mm-hmm.
And so my sister was like, girl, you need to go to therapy. You got to finally deal with this, because she was 8.5 years my senior. And once she had gotten into college, finally went to therapy to deal with it. And so she always suggested that I did that. But again, we weren't talking about it. I didn't think I needed it. So I did it for about 3 months. And then fast forward, I continued back on working in the industry, became executive vice president. That was like my highest position at Universal Motown Records. And I ended up walking away from my career to deal with just physical health challenges and mental health challenges. And once I got back home, and years went by and I still wasn't properly dealing with it. I kind of was just like at home and trying to figure out what was next. And so my best friend took her own life in 2014. And then I came really close to taking my own life in 2015. That's why I started Silence the Shame, out of my own pain and struggles and not knowing what to do, not really knowing how to get help, not knowing how to talk about it. And so once I got the help that I needed, I kind of started Silence the Shame as like a little hashtag. And I started open sharing and talking about it to certain friends that would listen, opening up on social media and, meeting some other therapists and clinicians in the area. And we're talking pre-pandemic. So people still weren't really openly talking about mental health that much around 2015, 2016. And so I decided to do a soft launch in 2016. I got Nick Cannon and a couple of people to do some video drops for us. And we did like a press launch in Atlanta in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And then I said, I need to take this thing a step further because, people are showing interest. They're wanting to do more. They wanted to talk about it more. And so when May of 2017 rolled around, I said, I'm going to make up our own day. I'll make May 5th National Silence the Shame Day. And I thought, there are all these other days out there. Why can't we?
You might as well.
Right? Why not? So we created this little graphic for social media and ended up getting like 90 million impressions in one day.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was really powerful. And it kind of essentially started as like this movement, particularly in, Black communities and in the entertainment industry, and formed a board of directors and got people on board to help and support. And we got our 501c3, and the first grant we ever received was a $50,000 grant from Jack and Jill of America Incorporated. And we did a 7-city teen mental health tour. So we did a lot of like panel discussions, community conversations that we call them. And, here we are in year 7, and I'm in year 8 and year 9 almost of kind of talking about it and doing this work, but just very honored and humbled to be in this space. Never thought in a million years that I'd become a mental health advocate, but there is a need, and still a tremendous need, I believe, even though we are post-pandemic. I don't think we've seen the ramifications yet of what's to come for mental health.
Yeah. I think, one of the things that was really exciting for me and also that I was a little apprehensive about is the fact that we actually do have some parallels in that my mother was mentally ill. And as a child, being, a child of color, the daughter of, first generation, the daughter of a Haitian father and a Puerto Rican mother, I was raised by my father. And the fact that my parents were divorced, the fact that my mother was mentally ill was never talked about. So I walked this planet as a child, going to school and just kind of doing all the regular things that you do as a young person, with this very serious situation going on in the periphery. And I did feel a lot of shame about it. I felt, because it wasn't something that was talked about, and it wasn't something that, there were no models. I didn't know of anyone else who had a mom who was mentally ill at all. Uh, I'd love to talk a little bit about the shame part of this project that you're working on and this movement that you've created. Where did that come from? Or just a little word for folks around the shame part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was the shame portion. I was just embarrassed
Yeah.
and I was ashamed, right, of the fact that my father had voluntarily, at the time, I was, taking his own life, but now knowing that he wasn't in his right state of mind. But it was embarrassing
Mm-hmm.
because no one was really talking about it, and it's still so hush hush in a lot of communities. Like I said, my sister now, it's interesting. My sister now, who's unfortunately, she passed away 5 years ago,
I'm sorry.
but just before she passed away, thank you. Just before she passed away, we talked about, she was on my Silence to Shame podcast, interestingly enough, and it was an episode around grief. And we both realized that, like, between she and her friends, right, and classmates, if someone had asked how dad passed away, she would say, "Oh, he died of cancer," or I would say, "Oh, he had a heart attack." And I was like, "Wow, I didn't know you were doing that. I was doing the same thing too."
Mm-hmm.
Anything, right, to say something other than him passing away or dying by suicide. And I think, people in our society, and we're just in interesting times in the world right now anyway. We're in a cancel culture. There is this idea of perfectionism when you look at social media and you turn on, whether it's Instagram or whatever is your app of choice for social media, but everybody's projecting this perfect life, even though we know that's not reality. And so, no one wants to be talking about things that are either going to make you look bad or make you look less than, right, to your family or your peers. And so, I still feel like it's so much shame and stigma that persists in culture that, especially even pre social media, we weren't talking about it. But even now, nobody kind of wants to, like, look bad, right? Or be talking about things as hard. Because the thing about, I think, mental health and mental illness, sometimes there's so many intangibles there, right? It's not like you can just go take a blood test and figure out, what's going on with your brain. And because when you have certain physical illnesses, you can take certain tests or biopsy this or take an ultrasound of that. And sure, you can take ultrasounds and MRIs and do brain scans, but it's not always easy to pinpoint, right? Mental illness or mental health challenges. And so it is still a lot of shame that persists. And, I had gotten to a point when I was starting to open up and share, because for me, having worked in the entertainment industry, and I know you can appreciate this, it's such a grand and braggadocious kind of world and industry. And, everybody's always highlighting all this cool stuff. But, it was really hard for me to want to open up to my peers and tell them that I had contemplated taking my own life. Again, we're talking 2015. Nobody was talking about it as much. You had Kid Cudi, I think, and a few other people who were loosely talking about it, but I don't think not in general, especially not really amongst any of my peers. And there were some of my colleagues that had taken their own life in, like, the 2000 decade and then maybe even early 2010. And it was very hush hush. Even then, when that happened, nobody really talked about it. And I was kind of terrified. And I got to a point one day where I was like doing a radio interview here in Atlanta. And we were talking about wellness and mental health. And I was like, what's the big deal? I was like, we just need to silence the shame. And that just kind of rolled off of my tongue. And little did I know it was, God just placing this, opportunity and movement and important work in my lap so that I could shift my focus to really help the community heal, I think, from some of the generational trauma that exists in our community around mental health and just not being, embarrassed and ashamed to open up and share.
Absolutely. And I think whether we talk about it outwardly or not, we're here. I've never heard of a time where there are more parents of young people who are concerned about their children's mental health and anxiety.
I get it all the time. I mean, and I don't care what income bracket you're in, it's across the board.
Absolutely. And I've never heard so much. And so I think that we are here at a time where there's an opportunity for us to take move the curtain away from this very real situation and these very real issues that are prevalent within our society, like you said, amongst everybody. And I love the fact that you have taken your love of music and your concern for mental health and brought those two things together so that we can have open conversations about what it is that's going on. Because whether we talk about it or not, it is real, And I think that especially like within the music industry, there is this persona that so many people take on, or people in all creative walks of life, where there's this persona of perfection. There's this persona that you have it all together. And yet there's no way that we could be in this world, in the chapter within our history that we're all in, and not be feeling some of the effects of the things that are happening in our world today. And we have to talk about it. And so I commend you for having the courage to take something that's so personal and so deep for you and to share that with the world as a pathway to really talking about it, opening up the conversations and helping people to know that there is a place to bring this energy. I'm wondering about this idea of mental health. Like, how do you define mental health? Because I think when I was younger, it was like either you were crazy or you weren't. That was the language back then, right? And mental health is so much more than a diagnosis. I'm wondering like what your definition of mental health is.
Well, from just all the work that I've done at Silence the Shame and listening to clinicians and, even some of my own team members, again, I'm sharing from a lived experience perspective, right? I am not a therapist or a doctor, but I really truly feel like, and even when you look it up, you see mental health. First of all, we all have mental health. We may not
Right.
have a mental illness, I tell people. So I've had people tell me like, oh yeah, that thing, mental health. I'm like, well, we all have that thing. It's
Exactly.
something that you have that I don't have or vice versa. And so mental health is how you think, how you act, and how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
It is, what gives us the wherewithal to be able to get up every day and wake up and be able to think clearly and properly, be able to, be a parent to our children, to be able to be a spouse to or partner to our loved ones, and to go to work and earn a living. So it affects our overall, daily routine and activities, right? Just like you have physical health, you have mental health. And I tell people there are lots of different mental health disorders or challenges, right? Or mental illnesses. And that's why it's important for us to educate ourselves so that we can, first of all, again, understand and just get that perspective out the gate. You got to have mental health just like you have physical health. It's almost one and the same. And I'm finding more doctors and people are looking at it just over the umbrella of health, or under the umbrella rather of just health in general. Because I think we do ourselves a disservice the more that we kind of separate it out. It's just our health in general. whether it is your mental or your physical, it's still your health, and both can affect one another. I've seen that when I was dealing with a high level of stress and anxiety, and somewhat depression, although I had not been properly diagnosed with depression at the time. I had gotten diagnosed with what was called cervical spinal stenosis. I was riding in a taxi uptown one day going to Harlem for a meeting, and my entire right side went numb.
Mm.
I couldn't feel my hands. I couldn't feel my right leg. And it was all a direct result of stress. And I'm in my late 30s, mid to late 30s, really relatively young for that type of diagnosis. It should have been someone in their 60s, 70s, or 80s getting diagnosed with that. And so it was the stress and all of that causing that physical health problem. And it's so many other things that I can name, right? That, even with, being stressed out, we have panic attacks that mirror a heart attack, but also cause heart strains on the heart, right? And so many other things. And so I think once we can just understand that our mental health is just as important as our physical health, then I think we'll be a lot further along as a society. And that's why my organization, I think Silence the Shame, is so important, because we don't do direct services. We push people to clinicians and other resources, but we educate you around just that fact. Like, what are the different signs and symptoms of mental illness? How should they be treated? How do you have healthier ways to cope? How do you deal with burnout in the workplace? All these different things. And we bring in all these professionals, and we are a mental health literacy organization. And, we curate community conversations and self-care socials from a wellness perspective. And we do corporate wellness trainings, all so that we can educate the community on the who, what, when, and where of mental health.
Yeah. And I think that we're made up of, there's our spiritual side, our mental, our emotional, and our physical. And, the mental is really the thoughts. And, there are also some clinical diagnoses around that. But then there's your emotional well-being. And a lot of times your mental well-being or not is an offshoot of what's happening with you emotionally. So the same way, like you said, that we take care of ourselves and focus on addressing how we're going to show up in the world and how we're going to integrate self-care into our daily lives, it's important to pay attention to all of it, to pay attention to what's coming into our minds, what we're allowing into our minds.
If your thoughts are racing constantly, right, it's gonna affect your mood and how you feel, right? And your emotions, whether you're happy or sad or what have you. So you're 100% right. It's all connected.
Let's talk about the music industry and the connection between this conversation and what's happening within the music industry amongst people who are, again, as we talked about earlier, front and center, and yet they're kind of playing out their mental health journey publicly in front of folks. So I'd love to talk about that. I know that you started the MIBO. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. MIBO.
So it's M for mind, BO for body.
The MIBO podcast last summer, and it was in honor of the 50th anniversary of hip hop. So, and I know you've had some amazing folks on there. I actually listened to your conversation with DMC on my way up here, which was really profound. One of the things that he said was he talked about how people see those folks within the hip hop industry and have used those folks as role models for how to live their lives, the kind of cars to buy, the way to dress, the way to talk, and all of that. And this movement to offer mental health and emotional well-being as something to model as well. I'd love to hear, after all these conversations that you're having, talk to us a little bit about that project.
Absolutely. I started the MIBO show last year in 2023 because hip hop was turning 50. And I just thought that it would be a good time to bring attention to the conversation around, mental and physical health within the hip hop community. And prior to that, I was really, opening up with a lot of my former music colleagues and friends and artists through our Silence to Shame podcast. We've talked to Big Crit. We've done work with CeeLo Green. We've had conversations with DJ Drama, Killer Mike, and so many others around mental health. And I just thought that, it would be nice for me to kind of have my own personal thing and show. And so I started the show last year, and one of my very first episodes on mental health was with DMC, like you mentioned. And he has also supported Silence to Shame in the past, and he's been very vocal about his addiction when he was drinking a lot and touring, and then his suicidal ideation. And he even wrote a book about it. And I just felt like, we needed to have more of these conversations happening. And to your point, we see artists' lives playing out right in front of us, via social media and online. And, whether it is someone like a Kanye West who has talked about, he's been open about his bipolar diagnosis and what that's been like. And we've heard Kid Cudi talking about it, even the mighty Kendrick Lamar. I think his last album was like an ode to mental health and generational trauma and that sort of thing, and how it affects the family and individually. And so we're seeing all these artists open up about it. And I'm very excited that I feel like finally we're at a point, particularly in hip hop, where artists feel okay with sharing. I just want to make sure that they're taking that next step and actually doing the work and getting the help, right? Because, some of these folks I know and some of them I don't know, but I still feel like people may not be getting the best care and support that they need. That's why I think it's important to continue having these conversations. Last year, I also had David Banner on the Me Show podcast, and he talked openly about, depression and what it was like, being, in hip hop and being a Black man, and understanding that it's okay to show those, vulnerable times and moments in your life and in your thoughts, and how you can get the support and bounce back from it. And on this season of the Mebo Show that just launched back in May, we had D Nice on, legendary DJ D Nice, and he talked about how, starting Club Quarantine actually saved him because he was depressed and he needed an outlet, and he just didn't, I guess, realize how important that was, of just having someone to talk you through, things when you're dealing with it, whether that was therapy or having close people around. And so it's just been awesome to see all these Black men opening up and being vulnerable, because for so long, I think, we've been taught, or we've told our Black men that, yes, you have to be strong and you shouldn't show your weak side or vulnerable side. But, so many of them are opening up now. And I just think it's a beautiful thing in our culture. But again, I just want to make sure that, because the music industry and particularly hip hop, is a very social industry, right? A lot of events, a lot of clubs and after parties and that sort of thing. And so, we have to make sure that we're putting enough time and attention on that balance, right? That we're supposed to have in life and in the culture, and leading people to the resources. Like we've partnered a lot in the past with Music Cares, which is the, foundation arm of the Recording Academy and the Grammys. And we've done a lot of, conversations and events with them to just, again, to keep this conversation going. I do think since the pandemic has happened, it's slowing up a little bit in terms of the priority and conversations around mental health, but doesn't mean that it's going away.
You think it's slowing up?
I think it's slowing up a little bit. We're hearing people talk about it, but the labels aren't really doing as much as they were doing around the pandemic. But, we're still getting into rooms and encouraging people to have these conversations. I still think it's just a long way to go.
Yeah, I think so. And I think because so much of the encouragement to men, and Black men in particular, has been to be strong, to, not show your cards, to not cry, these things, these behaviors that really lead to helping them to shove things down and repress them and live in the duality of, everything's great when in fact they're imploding on the inside. And I think that the more that we at the ground level start to raise this as a topic and start having these conversations, not from the perspective of, shame, and pointing the finger, but really offering a way to choose an alternate path or to choose ways to release some of that energy that they have, some of that anger, that anxiety, and all of that. I think the more that we do that, the better things are going to be, because those issues, while we're talking about them for the hip hop community, for parents, those issues wind up bringing themselves into the family, because that's really that's the playground for all of this. So I think the more that we can do to talk about it and pull the curtain back and really talk openly about how tough it is to live in the world at this time. I mean, there were wars going on. There's men and women are at odds with each other.
We're in an election year again. We don't know what that's going to mean.
We're in
an
election year. There's so many things that are going on, and we've become so pretend numb to all that. And I say pretend numb because it's you can scroll and see children being killed and, folks in the hip hop community doing horrible stuff and wonderful things happening. You can go through 50 different emotions in the period of 90 seconds, and we're numb to it.
We really are. And to your point, becoming desensitized, to all of that. And it can be troubling if we don't stay on top of it. And
yeah, I
just want people to know, Lisane, that it's okay to step away sometimes, right? I'm not suggesting to people you walk away from, I was at the height of my career making a ton of money. I did what worked for me, and I had to step away and stop for a while. And even when you look at an artist like a Andre 3000, who, I don't know, maybe he'll rap again one day, but, he decided to focus more on either doing films, or now he's, doing, he did an album with his flute, and now he's
say do flute away. I love it.
And he's spoken in the past about his social anxiety and, whether, Little John, he's a name it or call it, but he just put out a meditation album.
He
right?
Sure did.
And he joined the Nation of Islam, I believe, if I'm saying that correctly. But I feel like everybody's kind of looking inward and focusing on mind, body, and spirit. Right?
I hope so.
And I love the fact that we're seeing more men in our culture and hip hop do that. It's okay to take a sabbatical if you need to and recenter yourself and come back. And, life has a way of sitting you down too, if you don't take that time to care for yourself properly. And, to your point, it's interesting you talked about, we have a range of emotions in 90 seconds, and that can be really hard to process at times. And so I want people to know, whether you talk to a therapist or a life coach, you got to talk to somebody. I don't want to see all these emotions and different thoughts pinned up and on the inside. And then seeing some of our hip hop heroes, to your point, doing some terrible things when that was a part of your history. Even for me, it's been weighing on me emotionally. It's looking at a part of your past and history of these people that you knew and worked closely with. And it's losing a piece of your history. And it's well, what does that mean? And how do I process that? And it's just a lot,
Right. And I mean, for me, I'm from the hip hop generation, as I know you are as well. And we grew up with these folks folks in music who were taking some of the emotions. I mean, hip hop is a very emotional genre. It's all about what's going on, what you're feeling, and what your perspectives are, and what your narrative is.
Well, lyrics are supposed to evoke, right, all of those emotions. That's why they hit so hard.
Exactly. Exactly. And so it's how do you take that and kind of evolve that as well? I think there has to be a maturing to that, to the narrative. Right. And I think that now that it's 50 years, there's the opportunity to see even those hip hop artists who have evolved from being teenagers and talking about whatever the topics were to where they are today and whatever those topics are, because people are watching. I mean, the hip hop, genre is huge, and it's global, and it has grown, and it is in every every walk of life has some semblance of hip hop in it. And I'd love to see us hold hip hop accountable. And I'd love to see the folks within hip hop holding themselves accountable and, my goodness, hold each other accountable, because here we are, two women talking about hip hop and talking about mental health amongst Black men and Black young people. And there's got to be some conversation amongst Black men, speaking both to their peers and to their colleagues, and also speaking to, the younger folks who are coming up to kind of help them along. We have to become more generous. And the way to do that is to take care of ourselves. Because if you take care of yourself, then you have it to give.
100%. That's why I love and appreciate Charlemagne. I think he has grown and evolved tremendously, utilizing his platform as a radio host and, talking openly about going to therapy, talking openly about his challenges, his emotions, his thoughts, how he feels from day to day and how that changes. But he's been very consistent with it. And I've been, completely honored and humbled to be on the Breakfast Club 7 years in a row. Literally.
I know, I've heard. Yeah.
Last month, my 7th consecutive year on the Breakfast Club. And I'm not a celebrity, but they allow me to come on and talk about what we're doing with Silence the Shame and the importance of it every May 5th. And, it's those type of platforms in the hip hop community that also can keep this narrative going, right? And promote the idea of us, being able to talk about the good and the bad, right? And being authentic in our feelings and our thoughts. So I appreciate the platforms too within the hip hop community that allow us to come on and talk about it and share, and that are part of the solution and not a part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have a couple of questions for you. One of the things that's really important to me is that this podcast, that I have the opportunity to share the stories of amazing people with the audience, which obviously we're doing right now. I think it's also important that we talk about the how, that people walk away with something that they can apply to their lives and to their own situation. So first of all, what I'd love to know is, what is your vision from a mental health perspective for Black men, for the hip hop community, and through Silence the Shame for mental health overall? Like, what is your vision?
So I think my vision, Lisane, for Black men and mental health is just continuing to be bold and to be open, and more importantly, modeling that behavior for your siblings, for your little cousins, for the people in the community, for people, whether it's in hip hop. We have to model the behavior. And I know that, no one's perfect, right? We're not going to get it right. Every day is different for all of us. But our Black men have been under attack for so many years. You can go back dating to the days of slavery when, Black men and slaves would try to get free from the master. Some of them were deemed mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
This falsehood made up by the master, and they came up with this term called drapetomania, meaning that the slave had a mental illness because they essentially just wanted to be free, right? So we had all of that stacked against us from a mental health perspective 400 years ago in dating. I just want people to, particularly, again, Black men, to be conscious of their emotions when they see each other and greet each other and be like, yo, bro, what up? Whatever. They dap each other down. Be like, bro, how you really feeling? What's going on? How you feeling instead of how you doing, bro? Like, what can I do to talk to you and to help and support? And, there's so many men like Dr. King J. Barnett, who is a former NFL player, and he's doing so much in the community for Black men. Or my good friend, Lamont Rucker, who is an actor, but also does a lot in the culture, in the community. And they were on this nationwide tour called Just Heal Bro. So many wonderful organizations out there. So Black men also tapping into the resources that are available to you. If you go to some of these, events and seminars, bring 2 or 3 other brothers with you, right? That may not have experienced it or be privy to it. It's like we got to build a community back up amongst, the brothers as well as the sisters. So I just want people to bring their authentic selves to the party each day. And if you're not having a good day, then say it. We got to be okay with people saying that I'm not okay. And then on the flip side is that being educated and being able to provide healthier ways to cope for people, or for pushing them towards the resources. And then I think for Silence the Shame is I want us just to continue to be able to grow as an organization. We are Atlanta based. We do national work, but it's all based on the funding that we have. So we want to be able to grow our funds and hopefully have a New York and an LA office one day. And we just last month, we launched our very own free app.
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that and continuing to grow resources. And I just want us to be one of the premier nonprofit organizations that really pushes the narrative forward around Black mental health and positive mental health in our community. Of course, the Black community and communities of color is our primary demo, and the general market at large being our secondary demo. But I just want people to be well. And because as they say, life be life, and so much still that's stacked against us in the community. Still have gentrification happening in the larger cities, and Black people being pushed further and further out, and opportunities aren't the same in the job market, and we're being attacked from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint. All of that is going to contribute to stress and anxiety in the workplace and different things. So we got to just stay open. We have to keep these conversations going. We also started during the pandemic, or right after the pandemic, because I remember what the Sunday dinners used to mean to our Black community. So we started having Silence the Shame Sunday dinners, where we would invite about 8 to 10 friends or constituents, and we had hosted one in my home, and we had someone lead a conversation around mental health and wellness. We had parents bring their kids, and we had a really great intervention with a stepmom and her son. And by the end of the conversation, he was opening up and talking. And she said he would not open his mouth about anything around mental health.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it was a power of just community and food and faith, and kind of getting back to just some of the old things that worked in our family, in our community rather, around the Black family and our morals and stuff. And so I just want us to kind of get back to what it used to be, loving on each other, not judging one another, being able to offer the support, and being able to push people to the resources that they need to be, to lead healthy lives rather.
And what are some of your practices? What do you do for self-care?
So first and foremost, I used to be the person that literally would get up, either be on the phone or like this every morning. And so I try to start my day from a place of prayer in the mornings before I get on my phone. Even if it's a short prayer, I'll say a prayer, or there is a YouTube link that I like. It's called Grace for Purpose. So sometimes I'll watch and listen to certain spiritual lessons in the morning.
And why do you do that? Why do you start your day with prayer?
Because it's a good way, one, for me to show gratitude, because I am such a strong person of faith, and not to impose my faith on anyone. But for me, I feel like, every morning that I wake up is a blessing from God. I know that every day is not going to be a good day, but I still try to find joy in the moment and things that I'm going through. I show gratitude. Like my knee just gave out at a conference over a week ago, and it literally stopped everything for me. I couldn't walk. I had to get back home. I had to lean on friends, and everybody know I'm so independent, and it's hard for me to ask for help, but I had to ask for help. There were some other things that I needed to deal with in my own household and different things. And it was like his way of just telling me to stop. You're doing too much. And if you're not going to slow down. I'm going to slow down for you.
Isn't that always the case?
Yeah. And have you focus on the things, that you need to before they get out of control. And so I just try to find lessons in life and every day. And by me starting my day through prayer and gratitude, it just sets the tone for the day. And that's not to say things won't happen, but at least I can start my day from a place of peace and calm.
Nice.
Not chaos. So I don't get up looking at the news first thing like I used to, because that can make you anxious too.
Absolutely. It's like you're inviting the world in to tell you how to have your day.
Exactly. So I do that. Sometimes when I'm walking good, I take walks. That's another way that I center myself and I ground myself. And then, other thing I do is from a social media standpoint, I have started to limit the time that I'm on. I'll get on and check my page, and because of the algorithms, things are so different now. You don't really see everybody's page that you want to. I'm constantly, being inundated with pages I don't follow. So I limit that. And then I have, I'm going to find it real quick, but I have the 3 Ds of social media. The first D is discipline, and that goes back to spending less time a day, right?
I love that.
I am disciplined about the number of hours and screen time that I give towards social media. The second is discernment. Is what I'm watching good for me?
Mm-hmm.
Figuring out, should I really be looking at this? Is this going to re-traumatize me from certain things that I've already dealt with, right? So having the discernment to know, should I be watching it? And the third D on social media is, does this content feed my soul or break my soul?
I love that.
D for delightful. So if it's not delightful and if it doesn't feed my soul, then I'm going to either keep on scrolling or I'm going to turn it off.
Right.
That is super important for me. And I just, I try to give myself grace throughout the day. And so I look at just my life now in terms of grit, grace, and gratitude. I need to have the courage, right? And that's where the grit comes in. The courage to ask for help if I need it. The courage to slow down, right? Or just whatever I need, the courage to do it in my life. And that's where the grit comes in. And the grace is giving myself permission to have good days and bad days, or giving myself permission to fail if I need to, or just bestowing that grace upon myself. And also giving myself permission to go to therapy if I need to. Sometimes I feel like if I'm feeling anxious or if I'm not feeling like myself, I feel like I fail myself.
Mm-hmm.
But giving myself the grace that I need to actually heal.
To be human, to allow yourself to be a human. Yeah.
Every day, even though I am this founder of Silence to Shame, and, I've done all these interviews, I've traveled around the world sharing my story. I'm not going to be, I'm not perfect. And to your point, I am still human. I have good and I have bad days, but give myself the grace to recenter or to get help or go back to therapy, or if I need antidepressants, whatever it is. If I need to rinse and repeat every single day to start over again, giving myself the grace to heal, because I'm the biggest project that I'm ever going to work on in my life.
Absolutely. And it's the longest relationship.
I mentioned, so grit, grace, and gratitude. Having the gratitude of saying, thank you, God, for whatever this journey is or whatever this day brings. I'm still going to thank you through it because I know that you ultimately have my back and you're going to push me towards the resources or just sit me down and bring some clarity to all that I'm dealing with. So that's kind of how I try to live my life now.
I love that. I love that. And I was just going to say that and I say this a lot, like the longest relationship that you or any one of us has is the one that you're in with yourself. And so that is the relationship that I believe if we focus on, it helps us to then have a different way of showing up with and for other people. Before we wrap up, I'd love to know, how can we support you? How can we support this work that you're doing?
Well, thank you for that. We're just, ending, coming off of National Silence and Shame Day and Mental Health Awareness Month. But
that's May 5th, is it?
May 5th.
Okay.
But I was totally honest, part of being in the nonprofit space, you're able to apply for grants and get programmatic dollars, but it's really tough with operational dollars. And people don't understand that nonprofit work, it's still a business. You have staff, you have payroll taxes, you have salaries and that sort of thing. And so we had to cancel our gala this year because we just didn't have the operational funds to support it. So, a dollar, $5, if any of your listeners want to donate to us, or know of any operational grants or any other resources out there, we welcome that. For our organization as we continue to try to grow. I'm praying and trusting that God wants Stylish Ashamed to continue to grow exponentially so we can scale and be sustainable. Um, so we're looking for larger partnerships as well. If you want to volunteer your time for our organization, let us know if you are a grant writer or maybe if you do graphic work or video work or just whatever your skill set is, we'll look to that if there are any synergies there. Also download our free app. The app is available for all iOS users and Android users, and this is the first iteration of it, so we really need people to download it, rate it, leave good feedback. We are nowhere near where we want to be. It's a lot of other things we want to do from an upgrade perspective, and we just want to know what you think, whether the app is good. If it's not, tell us what you don't like about it or what you do like about it. So we welcome all of that feedback. And again, that's just a free resource for the community. We also have really great content that exists from the last, 6-7 years on our YouTube page. So if you're listening or driving in the car, listen to some of our community conversations and forward that content on. If you know somebody's struggling, just say, hey, take a look at this. This might help you. I mean, we have everything on conversations around menopause and mental health to mental health in the workplace. And all of those conversations, in my opinion, are still very relevant and valuable to the community. So check that out. We also have a Stylish Ashamed podcast that's available on all podcast platforms. So please check out, again, even previous podcast. You could binge listen to previous podcast episodes, and our website is www.silenceashamed.com. So please check us out. And then my own personal show, the Mibo Show, please, listen to it. It's THEMIBO Show, SHOW. It's on YouTube as well as all audio podcast platforms. And you can follow me on Instagram at Shanti Das 404, SHANTIDAS 404. Just out here trying to do my best to inspire others to get help if needed, or just to educate their own families and communities around mental health and wellness.
So I hope, to the audience, donate, help this organization if you agree that this is a movement and a conversation that absolutely needs to continue and needs to expand. Find a way to support this organization. I think we have to lift up and support those of us who have the courage to step forward to identify a problem that exists and who are willing to find solutions. And those things don't happen for free. It takes, it takes money, it takes support, it takes collaborations, it takes, volunteers and people to really come around and surround your organization and hold you up and support you in doing this very important work on behalf of humans everywhere.
Thank you. May I ask you a personal question?
You can ask me a personal question, Shanti.
So I know that your family has been doing a lot with a lot of your brother's work and exhibits and so forth. And when I was in Paris last year, I got to go to the Louis Vuitton Museum.
Oh, that was an amazing, amazing show at the Louis Vuitton Foundation.
It was everything. And I'm just so proud to see how you all are lifting up the legacy, the rich legacy of your brother and his brilliance. And I just want to thank you. I mean, I'm buying everything. I bought the swatches. I bought sweatshirts. I've gone
Thank
to
you so much.
And I really didn't know as much about his work growing up. But of course, he's like a pop icon now in terms of just the legacy and the history. And I'm so glad to see that. But it's just, he was brilliant. And I just want to thank you for his life. And
thank you. Did you see the exhibition in New York or LA?
I did not, unfortunately.
Oh, girl, you missed it. It was so good. It's done. It's done.
I know. I've
You
been told.
missed it. You missed a good one, I'm telling you. Uh, yeah, but that was a way for us to really share more of him with people who had been asking. But you said you had a question. What's the question?
How old were you when your brother passed away?
Oh, I was 24 when my brother passed away.
Okay.
I was 24 years old. And it was devastating, obviously, to my family, devastating to my parents. And it really impacted the trajectory of my family's mental and emotional path afterwards, because it was shocking. And I think that as you're exiting your adolescence, you start the process of processing your childhood and processing those events. And then it was all exacerbated by the fact that our brother, we lost my brother. And so it was very, very difficult. And so that is the reason why I started this conversation talking about how excited I was to meet you and to thank you for the work that you're doing, and to acknowledge how mental well-being and emotional well-being and mental health and need to be a priority for us.
People don't talk enough about mental health and grief.
No.
How that goes hand in hand. Because I lost my sister 5 years ago, as I mentioned.
You mentioned that, and I'm very sorry. And I know that there's a conversation to be had about losing a sibling. And it wasn't until, and I know we're going over by a couple of minutes, and I'm sorry, but I just want to get this out. It wasn't until my sister Janine and I were writing the catalog that accompanied the King Pleasure, Jean-Michel Basquiat King Pleasure exhibition. It wasn't until we were writing that we really had the opportunity to talk about how profound a loss and how deep the grief is when you lose a sibling, because you lose a sibling and your parents have also lost a child. And so for us, or for me, I'll speak for myself, it really was this compartmentalization that needed to happen between my grief at having lost my brother and what my parents were going through. And that grief overshot and trumped everything that we were feeling, because it was like, how dare I, when when they lost their child.
When actuality, though, it should coexist.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. And I think that for me, I asked you the question about what your vision was for mental health. For me, my vision for mental health is where we actually get down into those harder parts and have those conversations and allow our children and men and young people and women and parents to have a moment to process the things that happen. These are things that are part of life: death, sickness, illness, all these things. But we really do need to integrate a pause in order to process these things that are happening. And a lot of these situations that are happening today in culture are happening because people aren't given the grace to be able to process their lives, to process the things that are happening. We expect everything immediately. We expect something to happen and we want all the news on it, all the insights on it immediately. And in doing that, we're simply snowballing. We're snowballing grief, we're snowballing trauma, we're snowballing fear and anxiety. And then it gets to this point where it has to go somewhere. And we're sat down.
To go here or to our bodies, right? It could be in the form of cancer or severe mental illnesses, mental health, a breakdown, a psychosis breakdown, all of that, to your point.
Exactly. And on the way, it winds up spilling onto our families. And so one of the things that I've been talking about a lot lately is sometimes that childhood trauma that we talk about, or these generational patterns that we talk about, are parents and caretakers who did not know how to process and how to manage their stress, who didn't know how to release their stress, or who didn't know what self-care was because they were so busy trying to figure out how to take care of their lives, how to keep their lights on and pay their mortgage or pay their rent or take care of their children. So I think that this world that you're helping to create, where we raise mental health and mental well-being and emotional health and emotional well-being as much a part of our lives as getting up and taking a shower and brushing our teeth and combing our hair, that has to be in there somewhere, or else this is just going to continue on forever. I think that so many problems in our lives and so many of the challenges would be served by something as simple as, if you need a nap, take one. If you're hydrated, drink some frickin' water. If you feel something about something, say something to that person, even if it's messy. But when we store things up, we become a rager and we become a very negative contributor to our families, to ourselves, to the people that we interact with. And we have to do something about it. And so this work that you're doing through Silence the Shame is so important. And on your behalf, I'll ask that those who can support your organization and support this thing that you're doing, however they can. Not everyone can pull out their checkbook, but whatever it is that you can do, find this woman, support her, support this organization, have these conversations, and let's figure out a way to evolve out of this as a culture, because it is holding us back.
It is. And the last thing I'll say in 60 seconds or less is, to your point, I love everything you just said. It is eating away at our families. See, when we have these programs where we pour into the teens, we do a lot of teen clinics. The parents, or either the father, or either sometimes in some situations the mother, they're not whole, or they don't want to talk about mental health. And so you can't send a child home to deal with families who still have a lot of stigma and don't want to talk about it. So to your point, we need families to have these conversations. Like you said, when a loved one passes away, sit down, stop. Everybody put your phones away. Let's talk about this.
Yes.
Pissed off. Let's share emotions. How do you feel? Are you angry? Which stage of, grief are you in? Denial? Like, you got to talk through these situations, because it's festering and it's tearing some families apart.
Absolutely. Has torn them apart, even though they're still existing. And you have to be willing to listen.
You got to talk about it. And so we have these also called parent cafes, where we train parents how to talk to children about mental illness. So that's one of the programs that we offer. So if you are able to, volunteer or do something, we appreciate that. If you do have the means to donate, you can text the word silence, SILENCE, to 707070. I am just so grateful and humbled to be in your presence today. I hope you continue on this important work, all these conversations for our community. And again, blessings to your family, and may the legacy of your brother live on forever.
Thank you so much, Shanti. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have to say, I'm still buzzing from my conversation with Shanti. It is really amazing to have someone be so generous with having had this incredible experience within the music industry, and then to take that and be vulnerable enough to talk about her own struggles and to use the struggles that she had as a way of helping other people who might also be struggling with mental health. It's a big topic, y'all, and we have to keep talking about it. And I'm so happy that she's created this platform, that she is at the forefront of this movement to really normalize talking about mental health, doing something about mental health, and ensuring that we as a culture focus on our emotional and mental well-being. It's something that we can take and bring right into our families as a way of helping our families to rid ourselves of the shame around mental health and learning how to do something about it. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope that you did too. I encourage you to support the work that she's doing through Silence the Shame. Find some way to support this movement. It's very, very important for all of us. And I encourage you, as always, to like, share, comment, and talk about these conversations that we're having on the Shaping Freedom with Lisane Basquiat podcast. Thank you always for listening. I appreciate you.